Hey everyone, me Kevin here. Here are the latest changes. Right now, the way the House Ways and Means Committee has written this reconciliation bill regarding unemployment will completely expire August 29th. That means state unemployment and the unemployment boost will end August 29th. The boost is expected to be $400, not $600, and not $300. That means there will be a bump up around March 15th from $300 to $400 per week. Now, this plan is different from Joe Biden's plan. Joe Biden's plan expects unemployment, or desires that unemployment continue through the end of the fiscal year, which is the end of September 30th. That's when the government's money calendar, so to speak, ends for 2021. Which is kind of weird. I never really understand why they don't just do December 31st, but that's the way they do it. Anyway, we'll see if this ends up getting changed. There are a lot of Democrats who are saying, hey, we should match what Biden wants. We'll see what ends up happening. Right now, it's tentatively going to be August 29th. Nancy Pelosi this morning spoke and reiterated substantially Joe Biden's claims yesterday that unemployment is too high, over 10%, once we adjust for people no longer looking for work. We need the stimulus, she mentions during her press conference, and she says that, hey, look, Jerome Powell says inflation is likely to be persistently low, so let's crank the money printer. Now, I covered Jerome Powell's speech in full yesterday from the Federal Reserve, and I mentioned that what he was saying was really a clear signal to Congress, and the first person to pick that up and talk about it this morning was Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi says that over 2.3 million have been forced to leave the workforce, and this has been heavily impacting moms just in the last few months, with 80% of the people who left the workforce being women last month in January, and in December, 90% of the people who left the workforce were women. This is on top of 793,000 people who filed for unemployment last week, slightly down last week, but still 793,000 people. And when you apply or you add in the self-employed individuals filing for PUA unemployment, you end up getting 1.127 million people who filed for unemployment last week. Nancy Pelosi goes on to say that women of color are having an even worse situation with much higher rates of leaving the workforce. Nancy Pelosi says this stimulus bill works hard to pull children out of poverty and address those who are food insecure. She does have a sort of revised plan in terms of timing as well. There has been talk that this bill would get passed right before the March 15th deadline. Last week, Nancy Pelosi and fellow Democrats gave a press conference, and they said their goal was to basically pass this package right before the deadline, maybe around March 14th. Well, now Nancy Pelosi is saying that she hopes that we can pass this bill by the end of February and send it to Biden in the beginning of March. We'll see if that happens. That could be hopeful thinking, but this is a little bit of a shift in her timing stance. So they're really trying to push through this bill, at least in the House. And with the Senate trial for the impeachment of Donald Trump expected to end this weekend, it's entirely possible that if the House passes this bill within the next 1 to 2 weeks, the Senate can pick it up right away, and we can get it over to Biden. We'll see what happens. So far, though, Jerome Powell is definitely egging on the Democrats to get this done, and Nancy Pelosi is listening. On the minimum wage, Nancy Pelosi says, yes, we are going to have the minimum wage. You might know that right now the minimum wage is just kind of a long shot. It's an amendment that's included in the reconciliation bill. The House is expected to pass it. We're thinking the Senate parliamentarian will kick it out. Joe Biden's not super enthusiastic. He thinks it's going to die in the Senate. But Nancy Pelosi is telling us, no, we're going to have it. But keep this in mind, Nancy Pelosi has even recently in stimulus negotiations promised other things that haven't happened. Just think back to September when she promised airlines an airline bailout in a few days, which never happened, at least not relatively close to September. Or the retroactive unemployment we were expecting to get, or the heroes pay we were expecting to get. So I'm going to take this one with a grain of salt, and it'll be more interesting to see what we hear in the Senate than what Nancy Pelosi says about this. She does, though, reiterate what the Congressional Budget Office says, that 17 million people will get a pay raise, and another 10 million people will probably get a pay raise, because when people making less money get a pay raise, it's going to push up people making close to $15 an hour, right? Like somebody making 15 right now is probably going to get bumped up when somebody else who's making $7, $8, $9 right now goes to 15. So that's how the Congressional Budget Office thinks that 17 million people will get a bump from the minimum wage increase, and another 10 will probably get a raise because everybody else is getting pushed up. So in total, the Congressional Budget Office thinks that 27 million people will get a raise. Congressional Budget Office also thinks that 900,000 to 1 million people will get lifted out of poverty, but that could come at the cost of 1.4 million people losing jobs, which is something that Nancy Pelosi didn't say anything about. So she kind of cherry-picked data here in her presentation this morning. I also tuned into committee hearings, which I'll tell you, they are very, very boring. Here's basically how the committee meetings go. You've got Senator Neal, who's the chair of the Ways and Means Committee, with his mask on. Okay, what are the yeas and what are the nays? And then basically he's taking a vote on the amendments, and we're expecting all the Republican amendments to fail. So usually what ends up happening is you have a bunch of really passionate but also bored Democrats going, aye, and then they do a voice vote. And this is all over Zoom, which is really weird. Then you have a few Republicans who come on and are like, no, 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 no. And usually O'Neill, the chairman, goes, okay, in the opinion of the chair, it sounds like the Democrats have it, and this, fails, or whatever, it doesn't pass. Basically, whatever the Republicans want doesn't work. And then, of course, inevitably, the Republicans are like, well, we want to vote. And then the chair is like, okay, well, let's do an actual vote rather than just a verbal vote. They call the roll and they go through every person, and inevitably whatever the Republicans want end up failing anyway. So, for example, one of the amendments that I was listening to, one of the many that I was listening to, was to only send stimulus checks to people with social security numbers. This is because there's talk about trying to get ITIN number individual stimulus checks, maybe the family members for those ITIN individuals, certainly family members as well. We'll see what happens. Other bills have been mixed on this, so we'll see what happens. The CARES Act didn't send the family members stimulus checks if one person was, didn't have a social. The $600 check bill did send it to family members, but not everybody does. It's a mess. The point is, that particular amendment to send stimulus checks only to legal residents was, of course, rejected. Vote of 24 to 18. It's really boring. They vote on so many different things. It pretty much just breaks down by party lines. And we're waiting for the final versions of these bills to really go through and go, okay, this is what we have. But there's a little bit of insight into what's going on. So then some more questions came up in the comments about the child tax credit. So I want to just give an example here to try to break down how you could expect this child tax credit to work. So let's say you have two children who are 10 years old. So the new child tax credit would give you $3,000 per child as a tax credit. That's $6,000 total. That's more than the usual $2,000 per child you would get, or $4,000 total. So you're actually getting an extra $2,000 of benefits, right, with the Biden plan, if this passes. So you get the larger credit. The IRS is also suggesting that they want to send you that $6,000 on a monthly basis. So $6,000, which is 3,000 times 2 divided by 12, means you get $500 a month in sort of your child tax credit given to you as a monthly check. That's starting in July. And this has led to a lot of confusion because when people go, wait a minute, but July through the end of the month, that's only half of what I'm supposed to get. That's correct. So for 2021, if you get this child tax credit monthly, which I think you can opt out of it, but anyway, and just take it all on your tax return. But if you do take it monthly, you'll get 6 months of payments between July and December, and then you'll get the other 6 months when you file your taxes. Then next year, you'll be able to get those monthly payments every single month for the entire year. Now, this is only expected to last about 2 years, so we'll see if this ends up becoming like a permanent fronting of the child tax credit. Right now, it looks like it's getting written in as a 2-year benefit. So that gives you a little bit of insight on that. Now, another question that comes up is, what are the minimum requirements for the child tax credit? And right now, you have to be working and you have to make at least $2,500 a year to actually qualify for it. But the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, Mr. Neal, is actually trying to push an amendment through that would remove these requirements, so that way people who are making even $0 can get it. We'll see. Obviously, the whole amendment process, it's a mess. We'll see how it all finalizes when we actually get some more of this stuff passed. I think it'll really become a lot more clear when we get the House bill passed, and then it goes over to the Senate, because the House is just all over the place right now. Additionally, there have been some questions about garnishments. So far, we don't yet have any information as to whether or not stimulus checks will be garnished for things like child support. CARES Act was obviously different from the $600 one. With the CARES Act, child support got garnished, and your stimulus check basically went to the person who was supposed to get the child support money. That was different with the $600 check plan. We have no idea yet what's going to happen with this one. So there's a relatively quick update on some of the changes that are going on, some things that are being discussed. Hopefully this catches you up to speed with some of the latest